Hey friends, it's John. You are on the JRB Tree Climbing channel and you are on the knot tying playlist. If you're ever looking for a video you've seen before on my channel, you can generally find it by looking through the playlists feature, and everything should be fairly well organized. And so today we're going to be talking about some elementary hitches. I'm not saying you need to memorize everything I say here today, but you'll have it to refer to. Many of these hitches are foundational principles used in other knot tying and device creation techniques. And so I needed you to have this information in context. And so instead of a lot of small videos, we're going to hit these basic hitches in one video so we can see the logical relationship between them. Today we're going to be talking about from left to right, the Clove Hitch, the Cow Hitch, the Girth Hitch. Now these look identical and we'll talk about why they're not. And Ashley's book of knots of interest, the term Girth Hitch apparently didn't exist at the time of publication. It is known as the ring hitch, it's known as the tag knot, it's known as the strap hitch, it's known as the Bale Sling Hitch. Ashley's book of knots number 1859 and others. But you can go ahead and associate the term Girth Hitch with all of those if you're looking through the book of knots. This is a lesser known variant of the Girth Hitch known as the Kellig, Kellig hitch, or Slingshot Hitch, Ashley's book of knots number 1697. And this is the Bull Hitch. This is one that I definitely want you to know coming out of this video. We will be using this, and this is definitely in my top handful of knots to know. And then on the right here, tied on a carabiner, is an even more secure variant of the Bull Hitch. And I spent quite a bit of time researching to see if this is published. And I'm sure I'm not the first person to have constructed one, but I can't find a name for it. I looked through the International Guild of Knot Tiers forums. I saw some discussions on Bull Hitch variants. I didn't see this one tied. I'll go ahead and let's just have some fun. And let's just say that if a bull is stronger than a cow, well then a buffalo beats them both. Let's call this the Buffalo Hitch so we know what we're talking about when I use it in future videos. It's really just a stronger variant of the Bull Hitch, and we'll come back to that. Okay, so from left to right, the Clove Hitch. The Clove Hitch, you can see as I start to release it here before retying it, with this small diameter cord and this relatively large diameter and smooth host, it's slipping. I could bind that up and it'll do a better job, but it's not known for being extremely secure in certain pull applications. We have to consider whether the host is capable of rotating or whether the direction of load is capable of rotating with respect to the host, because that can cause it to come undone. But it is an important hitch to know, and it's used in a number of systems. Let's take that straight off. You've already seen me create this device. This is the very device I created, the JRB Garda Hitch foot loop, which uses a Clove Hitch in it, and it uses a variant of the Bull Hitch. The creation of this device would not have been possible were it not for my knowledge of these basic hitches. So we may come back to that, but I wanted you to have a real-world example of how these things fit together. All right, so let's take that Clove Hitch and let's first tie it on this fixed host. Something I rarely do. There's usually a better hitch for me if I'm tying to a fixed host, but let's make sure you know all the ways to tie this. I start by putting the working end over the host a second time, but overlapping. And then I'm going to pass it around one more time, but under that crossing strand. So that's a Clove Hitch. Let's see it now tied in hand. I will make an overhand turn. I'll make a second overhand turn, and I will reverse the orientation of those two turns. And my carabiner goes in there. On this tighter diameter host, it binds better. Okay, let's see that again, and note that, I made overhand turns. I could have made underhand turns, 2 underhand turns, and reversed the orientation, I still had a clove hitch. My father, when I was a boy and he was working a loft and I'd go with him on weekends and he'd say, pass me up a hammer, and all that was hanging down was a rope, we always pass it up with a clove hitch. How did we do that? Well, Dad used to tie him this way: spin the rope. I'm still going to create an overhand turn, but he would create it by spinning the rope. So I'll take my right hand and I will spin it as if I'm putting a bolt into a nut or a bottle cap on, and that creates that overhand turn. So there's one turn, there's a second. So the end result is the same. I have 2 overhand turns, overlap, insert my carabiner or my hammer. It's a trivial cinching hitch. Okay, but one thing that's really important to note about the clove hitch as you decide where to employ it is that it's not what I would call spin neutral. Because I was making that spinning motion, it puts a spin in the rope. So if I were to take, this is an old and well beat up piece of PMI accessory cord. It's rather stiff in nature, closed in a double fisherman's knot. And the point of using this rather stiff rope is to demonstrate what happens if I create a clove hitch here in the middle of this loop. So I'll create an overhand turn, create a second overhand turn. I will reverse the orientation of the strands. I'll put in my carabiner. And as I created that, I could feel this fighting me. And look what happened. Those turns, those twists I put in, I'm not saying I couldn't get this to hold, but there is a spin that doesn't want to be there. And so that's important to recognize when you're tying a clove hitch. You want to do it on a long strand of rope or an open strand of rope. When I built this mechanism, you'll note that I tied the clove hitch first and then I closed it in a bend. If I would have done it the opposite way, created a loop, created a clove hitch, put it on, well then I'd have those twists to deal with. So please remember that about the clove hitch. It's not spin neutral. That's different than the other things we're going to be talking about today. Everything else we're going to talk about today is spin neutral. If I created a girth hitch here on this bar, I don't have to worry about spin. It's perfect. There's no spin put into the cord. Okay, so let's move across. The cow hitch versus the girth hitch. So the first point is in Ashley's Book of Knots. The term girth hitch is actually not mentioned. The girth hitch is known as the ring hitch. It's known as the tag knot, the strap hitch, the Bale sling hitch, but the term girth hitch does not appear in Ashley's Book of Knots. But this mechanism is well described with those names. At some point later in the vernacular, the term girth hitch came in. Cow hitch is, the part you can see is identical. However, what you can't see, and I'll bring in the field of view, is I've just got 2 open ends here on this cow hitch, and a cow hitch is only loaded on 1 strand. Presumably it was just used as a trivial hitch to attach a cow to a post. Just connecting dots there with the name. And if I were to pull on just one side of this with this small diameter cord, this relatively large diameter and smooth host, you can see that that's not holding. Now my cow just got away. And so it's a trivial hitch when you load it on 1 strand. As a climber, I can't say I have any real applications for the cow hitch loading it on 1 strand. I always prefer the girth hitch, which, as you'd guess, is loaded on both strands. I've got this closed in a bend, and so that can't get away. So I just need you to be aware of that. You see it in your own internet research. You see cow hitch, you see girth hitch. You know that this portion is the same, but girth hitch is the one we're after because it's secure, because it is loading both strands and nobody can slip through and get away. Now, I think everybody knows how to tie a girth hitch. We can put this over and drop this through. We could do it the other way. Under and through. We got ourselves a basic girth hitch. Here tied on the tree, I have a Prusik loop, and I've tied that to the tree, very small tree I might add, with a girth hitch. So as basic as that is, as well as everyone understands the concept of a girth hitch, surprising to me is that we are using the term girth hitch incorrectly in the saddle hunting industry. This is a tether. This monstrous tether came when I purchased my saddle. I don't actually use it, but all over the saddle hunting industry, we've got folks doing this to attach their tethers to a tree. Put this loop around the tree, attach themselves here, and they call that a girth hitch. I'm sorry, but this is not a girth hitch. This is not a girth hitch. A girth hitch is loaded on 2 strands, right? That's a girth hitch. It's loaded on 2 strands. This is a running eye. That's what this is. Now, I realize crazy diameter here for this, but that's a running eye. It's described in Ashley's Book of Knots, number 1699. If this were not a sewn eye, let's say it was a bowline, well, it'd be a running bowline. If it were a figure of 8 loop, it'd be a running figure of 8 loop. And so I don't expect everyone to change their brochures right away, but just need you to know that this is not a girth hitch. That's a running eye, and we should call it that. And it doesn't bind as well. And we were going to come back to this later in the video. There's more to come. Okay, so let's take that girth hitch and let's tie it on a carabiner. Well, it's the same thing, right? Pretty straightforward. But it also can be tied in another fashion, and I'll demonstrate that on the ring. Tied in the bight by passing it through the object and the object through it. That works the same way on a beaner. I learned this lesson the hard way. I was aloft when I was a younger climber, and I had a lineman's belt with 2 strands, and I thought it was a good idea to attach this with a girth hitch to a beaner, and my beaner fell to the ground, and that's when I realized the hard way that a girth hitch tied around a carabiner or ring is not very secure. And we'll get to more secure variants thereof. So that's all about the girth hitch. Let's take a quick look at this, the Kellig, Kellig hitch, or Slingshot Hitch, Ashley's Book of Knots, number 1697. Unlike the girth hitch, which just has 2 crossing points per side, 1 crossing point per side, the Kellig hitch has 2 crossing points per side. So where this one will move when loaded as a cow hitch, this one won't on this combination. So how do we create that? Instead of passing these 2 strands simply through, I'll put them around and then pull them through. So the lesson we're learning here, I'm not saying you ever need to tie this, but the lesson we're learning is the more crossing points, the more friction, the more resistance in this portion of the hitch, the better it binds when loading 1 strand, and the better it cinches to the host. It just cinches better, where this is floppy and loose. Okay, so let's continue to take that to the right. This is the bull hitch, and I want you to know how to tie the bull hitch. The bull hitch has even more friction, even more resistance, and it can be loaded on 1 strand or on 2 strands. The exact loading factor, I believe, can vary a little bit on the 2 strands because of the crossing point being nonlinear in nature. One goes over, one goes under, but it's regarded as much more secure, and I'll show you some applications in other videos for that. So let's see how to tie that. And I'll leave this one there for observation. I rarely tie it on a fixed host, but I tie it frequently on a carabiner or on a ring. And so let's see how to do that. Okay, get myself organized here, stuff everywhere. Here we've got a length of cord, and I'm going to tie a bull hitch. I'm going to start by tying a girth hitch. So I'm going to separate this. So that basic girth hitch that I believe everyone has mastered is how we start. And we transform, I'll get in tight here so you can see this. We transform a girth hitch into a bull hitch by taking one of these two loops over my thumb as the temporary host, and I will pass it under the other one and rotate it around 360 degrees. So give myself a little room here to work. I'll take the loop on my right, I will pass it, I'm sorry, yeah, my right, your right. I'm going to pass it under the one on the left, go around, and I have a bull hitch. Often when we just tie it, it'll look like that, but I'm told the proper way to dress it is to ensure you have that crossing point back and front. Okay, let's tie that on a ring. Start with a girth hitch, pass that bite up. I've got my girth hitch. This is a little less straightforward, but I'll show you how to do it. We lengthen this bite, and then I twist it over. I did it from right to left. I could have done it the other way. And then I passed that up and over the top of the ring. And I've tied in the bite, I have tied that same bull hitch. And because it cinches better, well, this is much less likely to come undone. In fact, I'll just tell you, it's not going to come undone if you set that properly. So you don't have to worry about losing that ring. Okay, and to undo it, I mean, it depends how much load you put on it, but we'll simply fold that back over, and it's backed out now to its original form as a girth hitch and can be removed from the line. I've cut away to prepare this so you can see how the finished product looks as we tie it in hand. So this is what I'm calling the Buffalo Hitch, or more secure variant of the Bull Hitch. On this side you see an overlapping set of segments and then a horizontal segment, and on the back you see just one overlapping crossing point. Let's take that off the beaner and then let's tie it in hand. It starts as a girth hitch. It then is transformed into a bull hitch, much like you just saw. I'll take the loop on the right, put it under the one on the left around 360 degrees, and I have an undressed, unset bull hitch. I'll then repeat that. Instead of taking the strand on the right, I'll switch to the one on the left, and I'll take that and put it under and around 360 degrees. I've just simply repeated the process. I'll put my beaner on, I'll dress that out. Note that I've got the crossing point up on top, the horizontal bar, and then a set of crossing points in the back. When that is drawn tight and cinched, it's even more cinching and more secure. It's better cinching and stronger if a load is placed on either strand. Now we're going to tie the Buffalo Hitch on the ring, and I wanted to start by tying one so you can see where we're headed. This is the finished product. If you look at the back, we've got those two crossing segments, and at the bottom we have a horizontal segment. And so I'm going to create that in this fashion. I'm going to go ahead and remove it first and get started by creating a girth hitch, transform that into a bull hitch, and transform that into the Buffalo Hitch. I'll pass this up through, down. I've got my girth hitch, and just like you saw a moment ago, I will cross over and I'll go from right to left, and I'll pass that over the top to create my bull hitch. And now with that longer strand here on the right, instead of going from right to left, I'm going to take that, get a little slack in it, and go from left to right. Left to right. It's a little bound up, feels a little strange at that point, but I force it, go over the host, and dress that out. And I know what I'm aiming for. I want to get those crossing points in place, and that horizontal bar. And so that is what I'm calling the Buffalo Hitch. I needed you to see how to tie it, both in hand and in the bite on a fixed ring before we use it in other applications. And again, if anyone is aware that that's been published under another name, please let me know and we will give credit and redo this video if necessary. Okay, now we've got this knowledge in hand of these basic hitches. What can we do with it? I can't possibly show you everything, but one nugget I need you to be aware of is that girth hitch, and the fact that we were using the term improperly, it doesn't mean a girth hitch isn't still of use for us in our tether connection. So for example, here I have a longer Prusik loop, and what would happen if I create a girth hitch, you know, if I just create a simple girth hitch around that, that's pretty unstable. Let's say I was making a false crotch. My design for a false crotch uses a girth hitch, goes around the tree, and that is used to cinch. Effectively what I've done here is I've created a girth hitch with a girth hitch. Well, that has a name. That's in Ashley's Book of Knots, and as mentioned earlier, they didn't call it a girth hitch, they called it a ring hitch or tag knot or running knot or strap hitch. Well, this is a double. This is a double ring hitch, a double tag knot, a double running knot, a double strap hitch. Ashley's Book of Knots 1126. And so I feel safe in calling this a double girth hitch. Whenever we create a girth hitch with a cinching girth hitch, that is a double girth hitch. And I'm not saying this should be your tether, but let's go ahead and apply that knowledge. So up here on the ceiling, I'm going to bring down into view. So here is another tether design. So this, I realize the rope color is not great, but this is a figure of 8 end loop, and it's rather large. And what I've done is I've created a girth hitch in the end of it, and then threaded my rope through. And so now what I've done is I have a running figure of 8 with a cinching girth hitch, and that's a great tether connection. It cinches, it stays in place. You don't need to worry about you know, having any kind of a mechanism here to tie it. And so here with my double Mishikon self-tending, so here I've got a non-mechanical, no metal cinching tether. It's not remotely removable like my JRB hitch or my Saddle Hunters hitch, but it's a really nice tether design. So with this kind of knowledge in your arsenal and a good piece of quality climbing rope, we can start to get rid of these animals that came with our saddles, and we can start to gain confidence in creating our own systems. We just need the right arsenal of materials and knowledge. Thank you very much. Look forward to your comments.